Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special episode, all part of the Green Careers Week. And we're really fortunate to be joined by Gemma and Merryn from Reflo. Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hello. I guess before
Thanks
we
for
go
having
any deeper, we should probably just say what Reflo is.
I would say, from my perspective, Reflo is a sustainable, like, activewear brand. We've really pushed into the partnership space, looking at developing closed for end of life recycling. We want to make an impact and to, I guess, like, do better.
Cool. Okay, that sounds pretty good. And actually, we are going to dig deeper actually into in another video into Reflow, but we want to talk a bit more about your careers and kind of how you've got to where you are. And so, Gemma, we might start with you. And Gemma, your job title is Product Development Manager, Mainline.
Yeah, so I focus on like wholesale within Reflow. I'm actually not on the partnership side of the business. So I have been at Reflow nearly 3 years. Was here from the start, and I think I might be on 6 or 7 seasons now. So yeah, would you like me to go into kind of what I do?
Well, yeah, yeah. Maybe start with your role as it is at the moment. Yeah.
So I currently source the fabrics. I go to the trade shows. I have been like sourcing materials that are kind of monofiber where I can. And then when there's kind of items where we think that we need some elastane, um, we have kind of added that in, but ideally we try and stick with recycled polyester monofiber. So that's the current kind of sourcing strategy. Um, and then obviously, I work closely with the designer on the development, do trim sourcing and development. Again, it's the same sort of concept, trying to make sure that we source the right materials for the right product and items that are going to be recycled. I also introduced to the brand a while back an upcycling company we're working with called Circular Ink. So some of the items where, say, it does have elastane and we can't recycle it, we've done a few kind of like gifting and upcycling projects. Um, I do more than that, but
Yeah, that's
that's
a really
just
good
to kind of,
introduction.
yeah.
So how much traveling does your role involve? Are you sort of out visiting places? You talked about like companies about sourcing fabrics and some of the trade shows.
Yeah, so this week I'm off to performance days, and then in 4 weeks I'm off to ISPO. So just looking at kind of like the latest trends, the latest materials, and just making sure they fit kind of within what Reflow needs.
Let's take a complete like U-turn and go back to the beginning of kind of how you got into this and a little bit about your education as well. So where did you start with this sort of journey and how did you get involved in fashion and yeah, product development?
Actually, it was my grandma that taught me how to sew when I was a kid. And I never actually imagined that I would go into the clothing industry. It was just something that I did with my grandma. And then came out with not so good A levels and decided to do a fashion BTEC. Learned how to like design and sew and pattern cut, and then I didn't know what uni I was going to go to, so I just copied everyone else in the class and applied to all the unis that they did, and then I got into Middlesex, and the reason I chose Middlesex over another one was because they have a sports program and scholarship program. So I was trying to find a university where I could study clothing and also compete and get support as an athlete.
Mhm. This is an important part of your sort of story as well, is that you're a semi-professional runner?
Yeah, yeah. So I ended up getting like a nice scholarship from Middlesex Uni, and I was able to do like the British universities. I won the British universities once, and also I think got a silver, a bronze. And then I was obviously in the fashion studio creating collections. And when I was at uni, I was trying to combine like my sports knowledge with creating clothing. And I knew that I wanted to get into the sportswear industry. It kind of just made sense for me. Um, and then I ended up having a gap year and decided that I wanted to do a master's. So I went to Manchester Uni and did material science. Um, and then came out and got a job as a junior garment tech at All Saints and realized that I'm in fashion and not actually in sportswear. And I kind of had to like carve my path as I went along, kind of like going just, I guess when you get out of uni, you just want a job.
Mhm.
So I was like, right. Um, didn't know what garment tech was when I first got out of uni. And yeah, just kind of like moved onwards from there, really.
And then what are some of the other brands that you've worked with over the last few years?
I was then in the Barcher group, so I was working on like high tech, and then they were in the group with like Sergio Trishini, Russell Athletic, Fila. So I stayed there for 3 years, garment teching and a little bit of product development. Then I joined Bamboo Clothing, where I worked with Merryn, did a maternity cover. And that's when I started to really move into the kind of space where I wanted to move into, which was kind of more um, sports clothing. And then at BAM, it's where I learned about sustainability and developing product for end of life recycling. And that's how I kind of fell into this space. It was not a space that I ever thought I would want to be in. I just kind of fell into it and then absolutely loved it and found it very interesting, combining it with like materials and my material science knowledge. So yeah, and then now I'm at Reflo.
Is it a really interesting story in terms of like evolution and kind of like you're talking about these sort of things that you're trying to juggle where you've got not competing, but the idea that they come together and then one thing leads to another and another and I think that's an interesting story, especially for young people, where essentially what you're saying is you didn't necessarily start out knowing exactly where you were going to get to. It was kind of like I've got this aim, and then is that true to sort of talk about it in that sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of like fell into the clothing industry and then just kind of like was making decisions as I went along. And now I look back and it all makes sense. But at the time, you're just kind of like, I don't know, just finding your way.
Mm,
So yeah, it is really interesting to look back. And like, I think if I stayed in fashion, I think it would have been very conflicting to my sport. I think I would have had less understanding probably from companies and just people. Like I feel like if you move into the sports space, you end up having people that are passionate about sports as well as passionate about kind of like clothing and wanting to do better, with kind of becoming more circular. So yeah.
great. Is there anything else you wanted to share, Gemma, in terms of your journey, or even what might be interesting is any sort of advice, kind of like you say, looking back, thinking actually, you know, as a young person, this is something you should consider, or that you shouldn't worry about, or that there isn't. I don't know. Yeah, is there anything that you?
Um, to not let anyone stop you. I remember my tutors used to say that like to get into the industry and to be a semi-professional runner, that I just think a lot of people didn't think that I would be able to do that, and it made me um, want to do that and to prove people wrong. I don't actually know any other athlete competing at my level or higher that is kind of in the clothing industry. Um, so yeah, so I just think for me it's like I think you could be a very good athlete and have a career. I think a lot of athletes come out and think, well, I'm going to become
Mm,
I'm going to move into sports science. Like there are other routes you can pursue, like other careers, sort of
yeah.
thing. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. There's a lot of people who end up being sort of ambassadors for brands, and they end up having to almost promote clothing. And you must be in an interesting position where you kind of understand the process and mechanics of actually constructing the clothing, whilst you're then also wearing it for the performance of it.
Yeah, I think like it makes you more picky. Like I know that if something works for me, it would kind of work for the general public. And but at the moment, I rely on like males like wear a trialing because obviously at Reflow we're currently menswear. There is a hope to break into women's wear at some point. But until then, I kind of having to go off of other feedback in terms of materials.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Should we jump over to Merryn? So, Merryn, your role is corporate social responsibility manager. So I guess it's a slightly contrasting one, even though I guess because of the scale of the company, everyone's connected and working together. Do you want
Yeah.
to talk a bit more about your role at the moment?
Sure, yes. So yeah, CSR manager. Some companies would also call it a sustainability manager or an ESG manager, environmental social governance. So the acronym can change depending on the business. But yeah, so it's quite a broad role. I only joined Reflo about 4.5 months ago, so I'm still quite new. But yeah, but basically my role is actually work very closely with Gemma and with the product team. But my remit is a lot broader than that. I'm looking at all of our sort of environmental and social governance, so initiatives that we do, and the way that we manage our supply chain, and the way that we manage sourcing our materials and traceability through our supply chain, and all sorts of other things to do with kind of environmental and social impacts, yeah, across the business. And so yeah, work really closely with Gemma on materials, and then yeah, sort of more broadly throughout the business as well.
So, is it you're saying that you kind of came on board with the company to help bring together lots of the different initiatives and kind of give it a bit more coherence?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, so Reflow, and this is kind of the case with quite a lot of startup brands these days, is it's kind of a purpose-driven brand. It started with these kind of environmental and social goals very central to the business, and which is a really, really great thing. As you if you join a company that's already, already moving towards that purpose, it makes your job a lot easier. But I was kind of brought in. There were lots of things going on within the business that were kind of various different initiatives that were to do with environmental or social impact, and my job was to kind of come in and kind of bring that all together, and build it into a strategy, basically, that would help us to deliver that end
Yeah.
goal, which our mission, I believe, is to be the most sustainable sportswear brand in the world. So it's no mean feat. So
Mm,
yeah, there's a lot to do, and yeah,
yeah.
so we just needed a bit of a strategy to kind of um, make it clear how we can achieve that very ambitious mission.
Yeah. Okay. Well, where did your journey start there then? What's your kind of path to all of this?
So my background is actually in some ways quite similar to Gemma's. I discovered sewing at school in D&T textiles, and then did that as GCSE, and then did that as a BTEC instead of A levels. I did a BTEC National Diploma in uh, fashion textiles. Then I went to university and did fashion design and technology. So it was fashion design, but there was a big focus on the kind of technical side of it. So pattern cutting, and how materials are put together, and what different kind of materials are, um, and yeah, sort of the more technical side. And that was what I was more interested in. And so on leaving university, I also got a job as a garment technologist. Similarly to Gemma, I went to work at Tesco F&F, so a big supermarket brand, and then worked there for a few years, carried on as a garment technologist. And that was where I really kind of became interested in sustainability within the clothing industry. And kind of, I was quite shocked by the scale of everything at Tesco, and just the sheer amount of waste, and the amount of money, and the amount of suppliers, and the kind of global. I was lucky enough to be sent on kind of factory visits across the world as quite a sort of young person in the industry. I got to do some really cool things, but really gives you a heightened awareness of just all of the kind of issues in the clothing industry. So I was keen to kind of move a little bit more into sustainability. I ended up moving briefly. I did a brief stint at House of Fraser again as a garment technologist, but then ended up moving to a very small brand called Bamboo Clothing, who again, in similarly to Reflow, had this kind of ethos of sustainability and ethical business kind of baked into that. Was the founding story, and kind of why the founder started the business. And it was a similar thing there. I joined the business when there were only 3 people on the team, so it was very, very tiny. And they didn't really have anyone kind of focusing on sustainability. So I joined as a garment technologist, but I really took it upon myself to
drive the kind of sustainability initiatives within the business, to map our supply chain and understand where our materials were coming from, and that kind of turned into me building a sustainability strategy for that business as well. And I stayed there for 8 years, and so sort of grew within that business from garment tech up to sustainability and technical manager. And then that was then just 4 months ago joined Reflo. So that's kind of been my journey.
I guess part of what you're also saying then is that it wasn't like you've sort of left school thinking this is exactly what I want to do. That kind of meandering as well. And I guess part of the story as well that you're saying, and it's true of Gemma as well, is that sense of moving between companies and kind of gaining experience and understanding how different aspects work and then sort of piecing those together.
Because me and Gemma have obviously come from quite a similar background.
Hmm.
We've both come from that kind of fashion background, but within sustainability kind of careers within the clothing industry, or certainly peers. So other people that I know from other brands that work in the kind of sustainability team actually come from quite a wide variety of backgrounds, and you often get a mixture of people that are from a kind of clothing background, a more kind of garment technical background, or you often get people that have come from a kind of environmental science background, and they might have done a geography degree, and then they might have come through that a kind of completely different industry, and then ended up joining the clothing industry as someone who has expertise in kind of climate change or something like that. So I think what's really interesting is there's no kind of one way to get into into working in a kind of green career. But there's also, I think, what's evident from Gemma's role is you don't necessarily have to be a sustainability manager or a sustainability person or work in that team to contribute and to have an impact on the kind of impact of your business.
Mm.
And so I think, when it comes to this kind of career, I think there are just so many different ways that you can get into it, and so many different ways that you can contribute, which I think
And
is
it's threaded throughout all of the roles, really.
mm,
Like from the person that's kind of sourcing the material, to the developer that's creating the trims, and then obviously the designer needs to have this knowledge, to be able to kind of set it right at the beginning. Sometimes, like, I have to advise, so be like, oh, this doesn't work. If we want to do a recyclable product, we need to use this material. It can really kind of cut back what you can do. So you have a lot more kind of strict parameters. But then it also makes it kind of a lot more fun on like going outside of the box and trying to be more creative within those kind of like guidelines. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, Merryn, this point that people can come from multiple different backgrounds and they kind of converge in these spaces with a similar sort of, I guess, responsibility and role, but having different backgrounds that they bring to it. And it also just strikes me that there can't be many jobs now that people don't have to consider sustainability as part of it. It just feels like it's sort of everyone's responsibility, regardless of whether I know Reflow, very much is focused in this space. It must be true of everyone. Um,
Yeah, definitely. Like some, marketing team, for example, are huge. Like kind of have a huge responsibility at the moment with things like the Green Claims Code being launched last year, and there being so much scrutiny around what brands should and shouldn't say, or can and can't say, and what evidence they need to back that up. And I think marketing teams having a really strong understanding of this space is really helpful as well, and it's probably the same for kind of any job role and any function.
I guess we could also just have a like reflect on your school experience of these sort of textiles and I don't know, it kind of I guess you both sort of have mentioned moments where it actually drew you in. I don't know, yeah. Have you got reflections of kind of your experience of textiles at school even if it was just like we did this thing and it was great and that was something I really enjoyed. Yeah.
I loved it. I mean, but it was just it for me. It was really great just doing something practical at school. Something like actually creating something and making something physical is what I really loved about it. And even though that's not where my career has kind of ended up, I'm very much laptop based. But that was what really drew me to textiles in the first place, was actually creating something. And then the more I did that and the more I created things, the more interested I got in how they were created and what the different materials were that you could create something from. So the more I learned about it, the more kind of interested I got in the technical side. And then the more I learned about that and got into the industry, the more I learned about and got interested in the kind of sustainability element of it. So yeah, kind of evolved quite naturally.
For me, actually, I looking back, there's me saying that I ended up here because I just fell into it. But actually, looking back, I always loved fabric. Even when I did my degree in fashion, I used to just contact mills and be like, "Oh, do you have any sample yardage you can send me?" And then I wasn't like I guess a rich kid or teenager. I couldn't afford to go and buy loads of material to do this like fantastic collection. So I ended up having to kind of use my mind to try and get fabric where I could create a cool collection, but not be broke. So I ended up going to Paris to one of the trade shows at uni, and then spoke to a few like technical mills, and they sent me some sample yardage for free. And I ended up doing my collection out of just what landed
Mm.
kind of at my home.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of at the time, looking back, just using up whatever I could get hold of. But I never really saw that as a kind of sustainable thing at the time. It was just I couldn't afford to, like, I guess, do the course
Mm.
sort of thing. And it was quite resourceful, I
Mm.
think. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And, there must be some sort of link as well then to where you are now, kind of having to overcome
Yeah.
those challenges and then it sort of linked through.
Yeah, just being obsessed with fabric.
Mm.
I like, in my mind, you can have a good fit and you can have a good design, but if the fabric's not good, then it's going to fail. Like,
Mm.
personally, I think that like the fabric performance is one of the most important things. So
I think getting used to failure is quite problem solving, and getting used to failure are probably two things that we both have to do quite often in our job, in both of our separate roles. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
with sustainability, think getting things wrong is absolutely par for the course, because the world is changing so fast and what we know is changing so fast. And so, yeah, being able to change course and solve a different problem is, yeah, happens every day.
Mm.
and using that knowledge, making sure we use it
Yeah.
to inform the next like
Yeah.
project or
Mm.
innovation, that sort
I
of
think
thing.
that some of that is a really important message for young people because I think you can, as a young person, get bogged down in that sense of you have to have the right answer and there is a right answer. And maybe what you're suggesting is you kind of, there's a problem and there's a solution, but then it's not necessarily clear and you have to kind of, yeah, find a way around and find an answer. Yeah. Okay. I was going to say thank you so much for sharing your kind of stories, your more personal stories.